Welcome to the In Shape Fitness Show. I am Coach Kim. Today's podcast is about physical fitness and the brain. It's the first week of the new year. Last week I was talking about the if you've been listening to my podcast over the years, you know that I am not a big fan of New Year's resolutions. Every year I deviate more and more from the standards of this industry in which I work, where we want people to reevaluate their goals at the end of the year after the long holidays, and you've been somewhat indulgent maybe in January. You set these New Year's resolutions, you set the goals, and then you do your damnedest to lose 10 pounds or fit better into clothes that you used to be able to wear, or maybe run a marathon or half marathon or something. And those are all laudable goals, and I have all kinds of respect for people that do start the new year thinking ahead a month or two, or maybe for the year itself. And in fact, one of the things I will say, if you haven't run a marathon and you're interested in running a marathon and you're thinking about something big like the New York City Marathon, it's January really when you want to start planning. The whole adage of doing the 4 month or 16 week training for something really big as far as an event goes doesn't really hold water with the degree to which our sedentary lives have affected the mobility of our bodies. So goal setting in terms of long range plans is all really, really great. But today I want to talk a little bit about the connection between the body and the brain, because one of the articles I've read that I always appreciate Scientific American, but I have to say one of my favorite articles in a long time about exercise came to us this month in the January edition of Scientific American about, it's called Why Your Brain Needs Exercise. And this article is not talking about, puzzles and crosswords and whatever sort of games that you could play to keep the plasticity alive inside your brain to avoid dementia and cognition issues when you get older, which you do want to do those things. But this article, it takes you back, in time, back to to our ancestry, our ancestral humanoids that came up off of all fours some 6 million years ago, I think it is, and left the four-legged life and became bipedal, and how that shifting from walking on all fours to walking upright itself was this really intensive, kind of condition that not only affected the physical issues of being upright and, your center of gravity shifting and having the spine loaded from the top down vertically and so on, but also in terms of the brain's the need to calculate and synthesize where your body is in space, take in all of these, pieces of information, and then understand how to coordinate all of this information, and then make adjustments to your standing and sitting and other activities in order to maintain your body and your balance. Avoiding obstacles and taking the steps, in the right place at the right pace, etc. So just the idea of being bipedal was a really significant departure from the kind of easily balanced life. Not that it's not tricky to be on all four legs, but the sort of physical demands that were placed on the brain when we stood up. So we know, and you probably knew that already, though you may not think about it. The thing though that I found kind of interesting about this article, has to do with how our modern lives have evolved, and how generally what exercise means to most people today in the year 2020 to many people is going to the gym, and the most sort of mental thing that you do when you start, a workout is to decide which piece of cardio equipment to maybe sit on or do or stand on. Maybe what channel you're going to watch on the TV as you're running your couple of miles or biking your couple of miles or whatever. The demand that we place on our neural capacity is diminished by the sedentary, sort of our passive approach to human movement. So while it may be great that you have goals to hit the gym 3 times a week for the year, that might be your New Year's resolution, and maybe you're doing it, and I again congratulate you for putting that in motion and heading in that direction, because just sitting all day is definitely not good for the body or the brain either. However, there may be, according to this study, some level of increased efficacy is the word they use in the scientific paper, but the effectiveness, the results that you get from exercise may be boosted by exercising with some element of mental challenge incorporated into the movement itself. And of course, the easiest example is something I've been talking about all week, because it's the first week of January. I am one of the coaches of the New York City Roadrunners Club, which is the host of the New York City Marathon every November, but we also help people train and run for half marathons throughout the year. And we kick off the first week of January with the New York City Half Marathon, which is in March. And it has already become a thing. Is it okay to run on a treadmill? It's too cold to go outside and run. And so I've been talking a lot this week about the benefits of going outside to conduct yourself in this training program, to endure the elements as a function of the benefits of running. Just straight out knowing that if you're outside running, you're running on different surfaces and having to negotiate things like cracks in sidewalks and other people and lights, stoplights, and strollers in New York. I mean, who knows what might be flying at you when you're running in Central Park. So I'm a big fan of just dealing with the layers and the mittens and the hat and the warm gloves and stuff like that to make sure that you get outside for runs, because ultimately if you're going to participate in a recreational competition, I call it recreational competition, which is an oxymoron to a certain degree, but it really is what it is, right? It's to bucket list a long distance run that is such a great thing for your mind and for your sense of spirit and community and energy, and of course the physical movement for your body. So we've been talking about this issue of running on a treadmill versus running outside. And I didn't bring any of this study into the coaching advice that I've been giving all week, but it's really interesting that there is a protein inside the brain. It's called the initials, the lettering is BDNF. And listen, I mean, we're still figuring out the brain, right? I mean, I think that there are lots of neuroscientists, neural experts around the world who will freely admit that we know so very little still in this day and age about the way that our brains really function. But they know, since the 1990s, that brains cells can grow. For a long time before that, we thought, destroy your brain cells. I remember hearing this when I was, I'm aging myself here, but when I was in college, and that was before this news. I actually graduated from college in 1991. So before this discovery, before we knew this for sure, we really kind of thought that brain cells died. And I remember being in college, my parents reminding me over and over again, take good care of yourself. Don't go to these parties. You're going to destroy brain cells and you're never going to get them back. Once they're gone, they're gone. But we know that's not true. There is this protein in the brain called BDNF. It's the brain-derived neurotropic factor, and it promotes the growth and survival of nascent baby baby brain cells, baby neurons. And they know that especially in the area of the brain known as the hippocampus, which is really important for memory, that exercise, first of all, exercise of the body promotes the increase in this BDNF in the brain. And that protein increase corresponds then to greater sustainability of the life cycle of these neurons, the propagation and the life cycle and the strength of these neurons. So that all has been, and that a lot of the atrophy in the hippocampus, which is memory loss, and then we go back to kind of the human connection between issues that relate to diseases as we get older that have become much more prevalent as we've become more and more sedentary. Dementia and Alzheimer's being at the top of the list. This protein and the movement of the body that helps increase the prevalence of and promote the strength of this protein inside the brain is connected. And so I am astounded by the possibilities of the way that our workouts could possibly change or maybe just adjust, not change maybe completely. Because I know there are still a lot of people that, need to go to the gym. If the gym isn't there, you're not going to do the work. As much as I am the broken record that says to you, and if you go back to this week's, what did I do? This week I did the rotisserie workout where we did like something facing the floor, then something to the side, then something facing up, then something facing the other side. We did a circuit of exercises that basically rotated the body on the floor entirely, nothing standing up. And those small like individual workouts that don't require exercise equipment, that don't require shoes, you can plop down in your living room floor first thing in the morning, which is what I do every single day. And you don't have to necessarily, go and kill yourself a couple of times a week on these workouts that you're hoping will be the way that you stay in shape. So I know you're still going to do those. We know that you're still going to need the gym. And so I guess the question becomes, how do we make, kind of controlled exercise, our modern indoor, not passive, but kind of technologically sort of modern approach to bodily movement more complicated through the tasks that are associated with this increase in the brain factor, BDNF, and thus keep that plasticity and the sustainable features of the brain connected and working within the scope of our time dedicated to health. Right? You have a finite amount of time in your day and your week to dedicate to your body. That's not good. I don't want that to be the case. If I could figure out a way to remake our modern world, it would be to figure out how we incorporate movement into so many different things that we do. By making things easier, we have made it harder for us to really have a high quality of life, especially as we get older. And we're seeing that, right? We talked about this last week. One of the worst, it's shocking, the trend of the decade that we just ended is that, for men at least, our life expectancy is going down. It's crazy. We're not living as long. We may not be living, as at both sexes, we could plateau on the women's side as well, eventually. But when we have reached a plateau within the scope of humanity, of our modern lives, when we know, by the way, that science tells us that the body is created physiologically, anatomically, our body should be able to live to 100 years old, at least. We know that. if you take good care of yourself, you don't carry excessive weight, you exercise, you eat well, you enjoy social connections and love in your life, and express sort of desire to be part of humanity. All those elements leads us to this physiological existence that it should be 100 years old, but we're not even getting there. We're going to plateau in the 80s, and then start dying off because we've made things so much easier for ourselves that by all the technology, by all of the conveniences that we've come to just assume exist, that we're really going to we're going to continue to struggle. So if I could reinvent some of the last 100 years, I want us to think a few strategic steps ahead in terms of some of the things that we do. I had a really big fight. I wrote about this in my book. A big fight with my husband about a yard and cutting the grass. Now, I've talked about this. Again, I'm kind of a broken record. I go back to very similar concepts all the time. I'm not like a glutton for punishment, but I do enjoy cutting the grass on my feet, pushing a mower, and in my little family home in Southern Virginia, I have an antique lawnmower. I talk in the book about the early forms of cutting down reeds and wheat with a scythe, this really beautiful, very dangerous long weapon, essentially, this big blade that farmers and farm hands would use to, slice across these tall grasses to cut them, to maintain them, and then became the simple axis with two wheels and blades that run across this rotating axis that you pushed, a la Mad Men was probably the most recent. I've seen it on sort of big TV, where you I think both Don Draper and the second husband, whatever his name is, Francis, they both were seen cutting the small lawn in Connecticut that they lived in, and I have one of those antique lawnmowers. I love the thing. It's such an intense workout to push this thing through the grass, and it's a tiny yard, but it takes a good hour every single time. Such a great core and cardio workout. And I have this really big fight. Just recently, I had a fight with my husband about buying a riding lawnmower for this other family home that has much bigger yard, of course, but he just thinks it's the greatest thing to be able to sit on this machine and ride around and cut the grass. And it just drives me bananas. I would totally reinvent that concept. No, I'm sorry. We don't need to do that. I mean, if you're, it's a single family home. It's not, a piece of farmland where you need tractors in order to, to produce, and therefore you cut, you mow stuff down in order to grow other things. The whole concept of lawn care is makes me nuts. Anyway, back to this whole concept though of it's connected, because when you are moving your body, having to manage decisions, what you're looking at, what obstacles you're avoiding, what position that you're in, and how you manipulate all of these different elements as you're moving is, according to this Scientific American, probably one of the trends that we're going to continue to see develop as it's move and think. If assuming our sort of trajectory for modern life continues the way that it has continued now for the last probably 50 years, where we do less and less in our sort of life as far as physical movement. We sit more. We have no need to get up to go out and collect our food, to go out and do much in terms of labor, like physical labor. we're going to be sitting more and more on our butts, or standing still at the very least more. And so we've got to figure out a way in these controlled environments to incorporate the thinking part into the moving part. And by doing that, we may have a stronger, sustainable action plan for physical fitness in the future. I want to end with a story here. We're 20 minutes in, and I want to just talk a little bit about another story that I have from my book, Darwin on the Treadmill, which, by the way, I'm really, really close to having it ready for a publisher, and then I ended up on this other writing project, which I'm working on separately. So be patient with me. This book will get published at some point here in 2020. But the story that I like to tell sometimes about the way that I could best kind of summarize how I view our modern approach to living. I view it as captivity. We're captive in our own sedentary lives because everything that we do is very, very controlled and limited from a physical perspective. And the reference point that I go to a lot is about two queens. Because in addition to being an expert in long distance running and in equipment free exercise and lots of other things these days, I'm a huge history buff, and I have been reading about Queen Elizabeth and Mary, Queen of Scots for many years. I've been just really interested in the way that female heads of state have kind of lived their lives. The United States, I'm still hoping for a female president one of these days, and that is kind of the closest thing we get to these types of stories in the United States. But in Britain, even though much of, I think, European life is still also very male centric, we do seem to have this a corner on the market in the United States to be as misogynistic and sexist as we are here. Across the pond, there was Queen Elizabeth I. We have Queen Elizabeth II, of course, is the queen of the monarchy in Great Britain now, but her distant cousin, Queen Elizabeth I, was queen back in the 1500s, the 16th century. And her cousin, who was a little younger than she was Mary, Queen of Scots. And both of these women, the reason I write about them is because their lives are so interesting and juxtaposed next to each other as young women. They had such similarities in terms of their beauty and their sort of majestic comportment. Like, they really just were very big personalities and revered in many, many ways, though they were also, kind of under duress of threat, often in their young lives as well. But they were both equestrians, and I write about how they were both individuals who stayed outside a lot. They thrived on their fresh air and the freedom of being outside. I think maybe that stems from the sort of cloistered approach to dealing with, that kind of a life. But they were both really, really serious equestrians. Queen Elizabeth, they were both also hunters on horseback, but Queen Elizabeth was also really well-known, sort of expert hunter, bow and arrow hunter on horseback. They traveled on horses, of course. Actually, and in Queen Elizabeth's case as well, there were counselors that were very, very concerned about the stability of this state, the stability of her country, because she rode so hard. She was a dangerously fast and hard rider, and so they were well known. Both of them were well known for that. However, what happened when their lives diverged precipitously when a lot of governmental issues were going on in the country of Scotland, and there was some question as to whether or not Mary, Queen of Scots, was trying to assert her right to be the Queen of England, the heir to Queen Elizabeth if she died, that kind of stuff. And so what ended up happening was that when Mary was really young, she was only 26 years old, she was forced to abdicate her throne in Scotland, and she rode across the border. She escaped out of a tower, and some random guy rowed her across a river to safety in England, and she thought that Queen Elizabeth would help her. But what ended up happening was that Queen Elizabeth imprisoned her. Now, that means not the same thing that you would think of in today's terms, in terms of imprisonment. Mary was under house arrest in terms of the luxuriousness of her surroundings. She was definitely not imprisoned, at least not for the most part. She enjoyed, and because Elizabeth felt very guilt-ridden over the specifics of kind of holding a fellow anointed queen, under house arrest. She afforded Mary all of these luxurious appointments to her life. She had beautiful furnishings in the castles where she kind of moved around a lot, which was logistically, I'm sure, quite difficult. But anyway, she had these beautiful tapestries and furniture, and I mean, they literally picked up and moved her bed wherever she went. She had beautiful linens, and she was given, the money to buy clothes, the gowns and the jewels that she enjoyed. All this, the sort of luxuries of being a royal, were afforded to her. The exception to that, of course, was that she wasn't able to move around as much. So she wasn't able to ride her horse anymore. And what ended up happening is essentially the thing that you're probably thinking happened, which is that so Mary was only 44 years old when she died. And so she was in prison for a long time. She was 18 years. She was in prison. Within a few years of this new sedentary life, she had all the things that you think of when you think of getting older and developing these sedentary conditions. She gained weight, of course. She gained a significant amount of weight. She was pretty tall, so she carried it well. But there was no denying that she ate these heavy meals, which were provided to her again. There was the reading I've done about the way they ate in that day and age is kind of astonishing. She had something like a dozen dishes at each of her meals. There were two main meals that they had in that time period, a dinner and a supper. And so, she'd have all of these rich foods, and she developed a double chin. Her complexion lost its luster, and she had skin, issues. Her hair had faded and was thinning out. She had stomach problems and headaches. She didn't sleep well. She rose out of a chair very slowly and needed to hold on to things to negotiate stairs. She was in pain as well. She had rheumatism. She had back pain. She had heel pain. Her legs were so swollen that they had to be rubbed every single day with these herbal poultices and then wrapped tightly in bandages so that the swelling wouldn't prevent her from being able to actually, control her motor movement, move her body. So Queen Elizabeth, lived a much longer life. She stayed active until she was, in her 60s. She didn't die until she was about 70 years old. But Mary's captivity, this imposed sedentary existence that she had to begin living when she was in her late 20s, was the thing that really, really did her in, essentially. Though she was beheaded. So that's a whole different story. Look it up. It's a really interesting story. In any case, I'm going to sign off here. Scientific American's article about the brain and exercise is not something you have to pay for. You can go to scientificamerican.com and read this really interesting article about the way that your what's going on in your brain affects the processes in your body that are part and parcel to the sustainability of your health. So I shudder to use the word metabolism as I talk about this, because this is not a podcast about, boosting your metabolism, but it does do that. And it's important that you understand that, the sort of notion that using that M word sort of loosely the way we have for years in exercise is not irrelevant, but the idea behind physical fitness, physical activity is about the quality of your life, about actually being alive and the quality of your life. And as we know now with this really amazing article, it's also about the as far as the quality of your life, about the way that your brain is able to function and enjoy the things that you're gonna enjoy when you get older. So have a great day. I'll be back next week with another new episode. I'm Coach Kim from In Shape Fitness. If you have any questions for me and my team in New York City or around the world, get in touch with us at bodybyInShape.com.